Hello and welcome to FLW TV. Today we are doing the Birmingham City fan takeover show. My name is Rourke, the chief editor of footballleaguewide.co.uk. I'm delighted to be joined by Gab Sutton, the EFL guru, you could say, on Twitter, and massive blue nose. And I'm also joined by Tom Oxland, another massive blue nose, and also a member of the Blues Focus podcast team. Tom, how you getting on?
I'm good, thanks, mate. You?
Yeah, very well. Gab, how are we?
Good.
I'm very well, thank you. Look forward to getting stuck into the chat today.
Good stuff. So, of course, it's been a very, very positive start for Birmingham City this season. We know last season there was a lot of turmoil, both on and off the pitch. We saw what happened with Aitor Karanka. Didn't necessarily go to plan, but Lee Bowyer came in and certainly steadied the ship. And as we progress into this season, it's been a really, really nice start from the Blues, it has to be said, in the Championship. Let's go before the season. We'll come to you, Gab, first. I mean, what were your initial expectations heading into this season? Because, you know, it's a relatively wide open championship, isn't it, this term?
I think so. I think in terms of the championship as a whole, I basically see Fulham as being the clear standout side, and it's going to be a question of whether West Brom tie up second. And if they can't do that, then I do think that there'll be an opportunity for a few underdogs to maybe make their presence felt. And I suppose some people consider Blues to be one of the underdogs that are hoping to maybe surprise a few people this season. For me, I still think consolidation would be a good season, and I think if we finish in the top half it would be a great season, and anything beyond that would be unbelievable. I think I'm very mindful of the fact that we've been in a lot of relegation battles over the last 8 years or so, and I think that the situation at boardroom level isn't great, and I think Lee Bowyer is doing his best to kind of mitigate that, but I think it's a year of consolidation required.
Do you echo Gab's thoughts there, Tom?
Massively, yeah. I mean, at the start of the season, we'd have all just taken a comfortable season for a change because we never really get that, unfortunately. But as a classic football fan would say, you know, the expectations seem to get higher and higher after all the good form, and you feel like, oh, do you know what, top six, easy. But you've got to try and keep an open mind and also not get carried away at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's touch on this season so far. So, as I mentioned at the start of the show, 2 wins, 2 draws, and 1 loss so far for Birmingham City, up into the top half of the table. It's been a very positive start. What have you made of the start, Tom? We'll come to you first.
I've been very happy with the start. I don't think we could have asked for much more. Realistically, I mean, Bowyer pointed out before the season even kicked off, we have a very tough start on paper, and we've done a lot better than people expected us to do. I mean, even the 1 loss against Bournemouth, for 70 minutes of that game, we were the better side. And what separated us was the lack of a clinical finisher. And hopefully now, after the end of this current window, that might change. But I'm sure we'll touch on that in a bit. But yeah, overall, some really impressive displays. Even the draw against Barnsley, we could have won that comfortably. No, overall, fantastic start. Couldn't really ask for much more, especially that Luton game.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly sounds like for the majority of the games this season, you've been on top. You seem to have been the better side for large proportions of each of the games. I mean, Gab, given we've had 5 games of this season, are your kind of expectations shifting a little bit? Are you starting to dream of a potential playoff push here, or are you not getting too carried away just yet?
I'm quite grounded, I think, Sam. I think that it would be a little bit premature to shift the expectations too much. I think, listen, if we're in the top 6, 10 games in, and a few of the favourites like Sheffield United, for example, are continuing to wobble, then maybe you might think there is room for a bit of an underdog to kind of crash the top 6 a little bit. I'm not quite there yet. I think, listen, the 5-0 win at Luton and lots of the other performances give me huge encouragement. Tahith Chong looks a wonderful signing, possibly one of the signings of the Championship season so far, but it's still early days.
Absolutely. Let's touch on the Lee Bowyer system. Specifically, let's touch on the defence. Now, it's been a really, really solid start for Birmingham City so far this campaign. Only 3 goals conceded. That's joint best with Fulham in the second tier. So it's been a really sturdy start from Lee Bowyer's men. We've seen a back 5 often be utilised with three centre-backs playing. Obviously, Harley Dean, Pedersen and Mark Roberts have often been the trio among the centre-backs. And we've seen Jeremy Bella as well. Someone we'll touch on a little bit later on this show, really shine as a left wing-back. And Maxime Collin continues to really impress out on the right. Do you think Lee Bowyer's got that set up at the back spot on, Tom?
Yeah, definitely. And I think big shout out to two specific players in that setup would be Mark Roberts and Harley Dean. Mark Roberts, who's been a completely reformed player overall, just across the board, and that is down to his confidence. Whereas Harley Dean, I always had a bit of a nickname for him, and it was Hothead Dean, because he picked up so many cards and just get into trouble all the time. He's not actually been booked or committed a single foul yet this season. So, which is a huge change for a player like Harley Dean. And I think that just shows how big of an effect Bowyer has had on that defence. And I mean, you could talk about the wing backs as well, but we'll get onto that in a bit. It just overall, it's been fantastic. And it's not overcomplicated. It's very basic. And I think that's what we've always needed to do. Just get the basics right, because we've always struggled to do it. I mean, myself, I've never been a fan of sort of 5 at the back or 3 at the back, whatever you want to call it, because I've been so used to Blues just having that 4-4-2 style, you know, very solid and hard to beat. But I am becoming more open now to this more modern style of football, I'd say, and it's working for us.
Gab, do you echo Tom's thoughts there?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's interesting that Christian Pedersen's done so well on the left of the defence. Tom mentioned Mark Roberts and Harley Dean, but Pedersen, I think he's always had the potential to maybe adapt to playing as a wide centre-back, because he's such an uncompromising defender. I think there's quite a lot of power about his game, a lot of drive as well. And I think it suits him in a way, because I don't think he's necessarily, when he's played as a left back previously, he's necessarily the most refined player going forward, not in the same way someone like Maxime Collin is. So I think it works for him playing on the left of a back 3, and his pace in the recovery is pretty useful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also worth touching on the central midfield pairing just ahead of them, Ivan Sunjic and Ryan Woods. Probably the latter renowned for his kind of tenacity and bite in the middle of the park. And I suppose you could put Sunjic in that same bracket as well. I mean, just how impressed have you been with them two, Tom?
Very impressed, very impressed. I couldn't praise them enough. I think with Ivan Sunjic, he always has to play well with whoever's next to him, and that other player can complement him. And Ryan Woods has certainly done that. I think when we brought in Sunjic originally, we expected him to be a better passer of the ball, but it turned out he was more of, you know, solid, get into all those 2-footed challenges and just take out any player in sight. And that's not what I expected when we signed him for £8 million odd, because there's plenty of those sort of players you can get in the Championship. I mean, we had one in Kieftenbeld. But no, this season we've seen a new dimension to Sunjic, and Woods has definitely helped open that. And I think he probably feels less pressure because Woods is so comfortable on the ball. It takes a lot off his shoulders. And do I really need to say how good Ryan Woods' passing is? He's a proper playmaker. You can see why he was so highly rated at Brentford, because he can literally just find a pass out of nothing. And we haven't had that at Blues for a long time. So it's very exciting.
Let's touch on Ivan Sunjic in a little bit more depth a little bit later on in the show. But let's now talk about that great day at Kenilworth Road. So arguably the statement result in the Championship so far this campaign, it certainly shocked me. Actually ruined my accumulator. I had Luton to win that game. A bit of a bummer, but there we go. But what a result for the Blues that particular day, 5-0. To Lee Bowyer's side. Gab, we'll come to you on this one. I mean, do you see this result as a freak anomaly or a genuine statement to the division that Birmingham mean business this season?
I think it's somewhere between the two. I don't see it as an anomaly, because you sometimes get these freak games where, you know, the scoreline maybe doesn't reflect the game itself, because opponents sort of score every time they shoot or every time they come forward, and there's some clinical finishing that gives it a sort of a different look. But Lee Bowyer described it as the best performance he's ever seen from one of the sides that he's managed, and I think that there were other chances in that game that Blues didn't take. So I think that it was more than deserved the 5-0 victory. In terms of a statement, I certainly think it's a massive confidence booster because we've not had that result. I think I remember us beating Portsmouth 5-0 in the Premiership as it was then in 2006. I think we might have had a 6-0 at Millwall at one point. That might have been the last time we'd scored 5 or more goals away from home or won. Anyway, so it's certainly a historic result and a performance that kind of matched the occasion. And listen, Tahith Chong, I think, has got to take a lot of credit for the inspiration he's given this Blues side, just because of that pace and the penetrative running, and he just gets into dangerous areas so easily. So yeah, a massive result that's a real confidence booster. But of course, it's only one game.
Yeah, absolutely. That notion on Tahith Chong leads quite nicely into our next segment. As you touched on there, Gab, Tahith Chong been a very, very influential figure for Blues so far this campaign. In particular, that Luton game, some of his driving runs through the middle were quite standout, to be fair. Tom, just how impressed have you been with Tahith Chong's impact at Blues so far?
Extremely impressed. I mean, he had some reasonably big boots to fill, to be honest, because a lot of Blues fans were disappointed that we didn't bring back Halilovic. So it was like, okay, who are we going to replace him with? And somehow Craig Gardner has managed to pull this off, considering some of the names that were mentioned to be in for Chong. We've done really well to pick him up, and you can see the quality he has and why he's always been so highly rated. It's just natural ability to just glide away with the ball, just get past players. I've not seen somebody down at Blues do that so well since probably a Damari Gray. And if not, I'd say Chong was a lot better, a lot more energetic. He's got more areas to his game, and he can play in those wide areas. But for me, that central area is probably the best place for him because he makes a lot happen, and he does make this team tick going forward. And when we've not had him on the pitch, you can see how much we struggle to get forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his position's quite interesting because, like you say, he can play centrally, he can play out wide as well. I mean, Gab, do you see him more as a central figure in that Blues team?
Yeah, I can certainly see what Tom means in terms of referencing Damari Gray there. I do see him as a different type of player there, though. I think with Damari Gray, he was very much an outball in that wide position where he would find large open spaces and he would absolutely gallop forward down the flank, really kind of stretching his legs out. I think with Tahith Chong, there's a slight difference, not in the sense that he certainly brought lots of pace and energy and direct running, but I feel like he can manipulate shorter spaces or smaller spaces maybe a little bit better than Damari Gray did, and I think that's been huge. I think over the last previous seasons, Blues have been missing an injection of pace in the attack, and I think a lot of people had thought that would come in the form of a striker, maybe someone like Che Adams when he was partnered with Djukovic under Gary Monk in the 18-19 season. Adams obviously went to Southampton, but I think what we've seen is Tahith Chong's actually brought that in the form of a midfielder, really, or maybe as a wide forward, you could say, depending on whether you see it as a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3. So he's been brilliant, and that's why we've created so many chances for Djukovic and especially Scott Hogan.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's touch on a massive signing for Blues this summer. That is, of course, the news that Troy Deeney has joined Birmingham City. Obviously, a massive Blue Nose himself. Huge fan of the club. Obviously, very passionate about his hometown club. Tom, we'll come to you. I mean, how do you feel about this news? I mean, I don't think I've seen one Blues fan at all that hasn't been pleased with this news.
I'm so happy. Like, I genuinely couldn't believe it, to be honest. Like, it was so untrue. I mean, we've all heard him say before that he didn't really want to play for Blues because of that pressure. And then all of a sudden, it's like in a matter of 5 days, his mind has changed. He's like, oh, do you know what? I've done all sorts. I can do this. And that does seem to be the sort of vibe. And his intentions are very clear. He does want to get the club promoted, and fair play if he does. You know, we're all rooting for him. But at the end of the day, I think as Blues fans, we'll try to put as least amount of pressure on him as we can, because we can't rely solely on him like we have done Djukovic. And I think that's probably an interesting segue in a sense that Djukovic, we've relied on him too much for at least 3 years now, and hopefully Deeney can sort of take some of that burden off him. And a lot of defenders will be more likely to mark Deeney, giving Djukovic more space. It will be interesting to see who he's competing in the squad with, whether it be Hogan or Djukovic. And obviously we've got a Nike now as well. So we've definitely got some firepower in this squad, and it would be great for Deeney to bring his experience and really put his spin on it, because he's got his coaching badges as well. So, you know, he's going to offer a lot to some of those forward players, particularly Scott Hogan, who is a bit of a confidence player. So it's not just for the goals that we need Deeney, but he can really, really help the team overall.
I must admit, if I was a championship defender and I knew that I was coming up against Djukovic and Troy Deeney, I'd be a little bit worried, a little bit scared, I won't lie. Gab, we'll come to you. I mean, how do you see Deeney fitting into this 11? Is he someone that's going to go straight into that 11? And if so, who is he going to oust?
I think Lukas Djukovic. I think that Djukovic has been a fantastic servant to the football club, and probably one of the best signings we've made over recent years. And I think there's a huge amount of respect for him, and I still think he can play a really useful role for this team. I think his abilities are very much based on what he can do in the air, and there's no questioning his abilities in that sense. I expect Troy Deeney to be slightly more accomplished with the ball to his feet, and hopefully we're going to see even more chances for Scott Hogan off the back of that. The main reason why I think I'd be excited about this signing is, I think, not necessarily just Deeney's impact as an individual footballer, but the impact it's going to have on the fans. I remember Gary Rowett's first home game in charge of Birmingham as a manager against Watford, and he was announced, welcome your new manager, Gary Rowett, and the whole stadium just literally erupted in support of him. And although Deeney's not coming as a manager, he's coming as a player, I think that when the PA guy announces that Troy Deeney's starting, or announces his name and number, the whole crowd will go absolutely crazy for him. And I think that's going to have a massive impact on that derby game as a whole. So that's why that's almost the thing that would excite me more than almost having Deeney as a footballer.
Yeah, absolutely. A very, very exciting signing, you've got to say, from a Blues perspective. Let's touch on someone we spoke about earlier on in this show, Jeremy Bella. Bella's had an influential role in these early advances of the Championship season, it's fair to say. Playing in a somewhat unfamiliar role at left wing-back, he's really impressed. 3 assists so far this campaign for Bella. Obviously, naturally, a more advanced winger, isn't he? But Tom, we'll come to you on this one. Have you been surprised with Bella's early impact, or not so much?
Extremely surprised. And that's not saying that I doubt him as a footballer at all. I don't. I was just really shocked at sort of even the first game of the season. I remember being in the away end at Sheffield United, and I saw the lineup and I thought, oh, okay, it looks like 4-4-2, because on paper it really did. And then when you see us start playing, it's like, oh, right, okay. You can see this sort of line of 5, and you're like, okay, this will be interesting. And first half, it was a little bit touch and go, really, with Bella being at that wing back role. He didn't look comfortable. And then all of a sudden comes that second half, and he's like the best wing back you've ever seen. And he was just fantastic. I mean, he even got an assist in the first half, but it looked poorer than the second half did. And then since then, he's not stopped. He's kept a consistent level, and he's not dropped. He's not shown weakness, and he looks like he's been playing there all his career, to be honest. And he's really touched up on his defensive game. It was never really fantastic before the wing-back role. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. But now he's really getting stuck in, and he's using his upper body to really get stuck into players and making it difficult. And it's fantastic. I mean, whoever has been doing all that training with Bella individually, fair play to them, because they've really created one of the most dangerous left wing backs now in the league.
Yeah, I mean, he's also a weapon from set pieces, isn't he? We've seen some of his free kick ability. I remember the goal he scored at Reading last season. An absolute worldie of a free kick that was. Gab, we'll come to you again. Are you a little bit surprised with Bella's early kind of impact in that left wing back role?
I'm a little bit surprised. I'm not shocked, because I remember in the 1920 season under Pep Clotet, Bella was one of the standout players, and you could see then that his strength was that he had lots of energy, got good upper body strength, as Tom pointed out there, and he's very good at just hitting. That year, he was very good at just hitting the byline and crossing. The following season, Ita Karanka converted him into more of a left-sided player, and it was more about sort of cutting inside onto his right foot. But in that 1920 campaign, I did feel like he had the skills to be a good wing back. And I suppose the downside then would have been you've got Maxime Collin, who's probably one of the best right backs in the division on his day. So it wouldn't quite have worked. And I think what Lee Bowyer's done, knowing that he's played on the left in 2021, is actually converting him into a left wing back. So you've got all those qualities that he can bring, but just doing it from the left, and you've still got Maxime Collin on the right. And what I also like is that there's some quite good distances in the defensive structure. So Mark Roberts, I would say, is your head at kick at centre back, and ahead of him is a right back by trade in Maxime Collin, who is playing as a right wing back, and then you've got a left back by trade as a left sided centre back in Christian Pedersen, and you've got a winger by trade just ahead of him. So you're never going to have that massive gap where you've got a winger by trade and then the left-sided centre-back is a centre-back by trade, which would create a massive gap. So I think Bowyer's got the setup and the balance spot on, and I think Bella his form is testament to that.
Yeah, absolutely. A really, really encouraging start to the season from Jeremy Bella. Right, I've got a very generic question for you both next. Tom, we're going to come to you first. Would you say this is the most positive you felt as a Blues fan in years?
100%. You'd have to go back to probably 16, 17 under Gary Rowett that I was this excited, because obviously you go back to that season, we started so well. We were outside the playoffs on goal difference. And Rowett looked like he really built a squad, and then obviously what followed from there on out wasn't so great. But no, definitely since then, probably if not more excited now, because I actually think we play more effective football than we did under Rowett, because it was a lot more one-dimensional back then. Now it's more exciting, it's better to watch, and we have a lot more, I'd say, much more technically gifted players who fit this system. And we can really look up now, and we've got a manager who understands the fans again, which is what we've needed, because that's all Blues fans want at the end of the day. We just want a team that's going to go out there and give their all, their 100%. And, win, lose or draw, we won't mind, just so long as we see commitment. And that's all we've seen since Bowyer's come in. I've never seen the commitment levels drop, even when we've lost.
Absolutely. Gab, we'll come to you.
I agree with Tom to a point, and I would say that we're probably creating more chances than we were maybe in the early stages of the 16-17 campaign. I mean, even under Gary Rowett at the back end of his time, we were winning games 1-0, but it felt like it was clinical finishing, and we tend to get forced back towards the end of games. Whereas now I think we're creating more chances and arguably a better footballing side, as Tom alluded to. I will temper this, by saying that I'm still not happy with the ownership at the club. Zwan Donreng's gone, which is he was a really unpopular CEO, for those who don't know, and I think that's good. But I still think that there's people upstairs who I'm not sure I trust. I still think that the issues with communication aren't there. Me and my friend, I booked a ticket for the game against Stoke on the second week of the season, first home game. Really wanted to support Lee Bowyer and the boys. Unfortunately, those tickets got cancelled because of issues with repairing the stands, and I would question the board on that basis, because I think they had a long time to look at those issues. So I'm not happy with the board, truthfully, but I'm very happy with Lee Bowyer and the team.
Yeah, very understandable for sure. Right, let's wrap up this Birmingham show and look ahead to Friday night's fixture against Derby County. So the Blues travel to Pride Park on Friday night in front of the Sky Sports cameras. To be fair to Wayne Rooney's Derby, they've had a solid start to the campaign. 6 points so far for Rooney's outfit. It really has been a pretty surprising start, you could say, for Derby County. But this really should be quite an interesting encounter in the East Midlands on Friday night. Tom, we'll come to you first. Are you confident of a result?
I think we should be on paper. I think it's actually at St Andrews, by the way. The game, not at Pride Park. Yeah, it's a key point to that. I wouldn't have mentioned it if we didn't have the stand problems, because I do think that will play a massive part in this game. There's been rumours on Twitter, but you've got to always take those with a pinch of salt that they might be open. I mean, Deeney obviously said on Fozcast with Ben Foster that he believes one of them is going to be open. I hope so I can go back to my seat. But we'll have to see. I think what's different to this to other home games so far is, yes, on paper we probably should beat Derby, but obviously there is a buzz from Deeney signing, which helps the energy in the ground. And whether he starts or even if he's on the bench, the energy will still be good, but preferably if he started. It's rare you see new signings go straight into a squad. I think they always end up on the bench for their first game, so it wouldn't surprise me if it went that way. But no, we should definitely beat Derby realistically, but if the atmosphere is not what it should be, then I do think it will affect us, because so far you look back at that Stoke home game, I think we could have won that if we had a full St Andrews. And it could be the same again. And like you say, Derby have actually started the season a lot better than, including myself, everyone expected them to do. And I think that's just down to grinding out results. It massively reminds me of when Gary Rowett first came to Blues. They are just fighting for every single point wherever they can. And it's not going to be easy, but I'd like to think we could at least come out with a 1-0 win in this. But we'll see. You never know. For some reason, Derby at home is always a very high-scoring game, so it might be an entertaining one for the cameras.
Gab, let's get your score prediction. And how do you see this game panning out on Friday night?
This could become a GIF or something to the equivalent. I am feeling very confident. This could come back to bite me, but I do think we'll win. Fingers crossed, Tom. It's great to have Troy Deeney on as stadium manager. He seems to be communicating with the fans more than the board on this issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's. But I do think that impact is going to be massive. So, on the one hand, we've got a template where we dominated against Barnsley in the previous game, the second half especially, created lots of chances. So that's an appealing template. But also, if that plan A isn't going to plan and Deeney isn't starting, what an option to bring off the bench and give everyone a lift. So I think either way, I think Blues will win. So I'm gonna go confident on this one. I'm going to say 2-0.
Lovely stuff. Well, guys, Tom, Gab, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. It really is appreciated. As we said, Birmingham take on Derby on Friday night. But thanks once again for joining, Tom and Gab. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Birmingham City Takeover. For all our watchers, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, FLW TV. All the new subscribers are very much appreciated. But once again, thanks for watching.